Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to speak at tonight's council meeting, there's a sign-up sheet in the back. If you wouldn't mind writing your name and the topic that you want to speak on.
Good evening. Welcome to the Anacortes City Council meeting of May 16th, 2022. Mr. Hoagland, would you please take the roll, please?
Mr. Carter.
Present.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mr. Walters.
Here.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Ubik.
Here.
Thank you. Would you please stand and join me for the pledge? Okay, just a couple of announcements and committee reports, starting with item 3, COVID. So there's been an uptick, as I'm sure many of you are aware, in number of cases. It's not been giant. Hospitalizations in Skagit County as of last week have decreased dramatically. Good news, no new COVID deaths in the past 4 weeks now, and still 0 COVID patients in Island Hospital. And I think we're about week 2 or 3 there. Another announcement, 32nd and M. A lot of folks have been asking about 32nd and M. Yes, we are going to put a roundabout in 32nd and M. We think the first week of June, probably June 1st is our target start date. And that's important because it's going to be about a 6-week disruption there. So there'll be detours and all that, but we're hoping to kick that off the first week of June. Also, I was hoping to do some promotions, but I know there's been some changes in the police department. And I know I can go ahead and announce that our new captain is Captain Chad Pruitt, and our new sergeant is Sergeant Rob Leitz. And that leads me into a quick proclamation for National Police Week. We will have those promotions formally in June as well. So to recognize National Police Week 2022 and to honor the service and sacrifice of those law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty while protecting our communities and safeguarding our democracy. Whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the City of Anacortes Police Department. Whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 23,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and have been killed in the line of duty. Whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved in the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. Whereas 619 new names, fallen heroes, are being added to the National Law Enforcement Memorial this spring, including 472 officers killed in 2021 and 147 officers killed in previous years. May 15th is designated Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of fallen officers and their families. Whereas law enforcement officers protect the residents of Anacortes from criminals who seek to perpetrate harm on the innocent. Whereas Anacortes law enforcement community also seeks to assist the community they serve through a variety of non-traditional means, including helping those overcoming addiction, diverting people from crisis, from being arrested or seeking treatment in hospitals when other options may meet their needs. Therefore, be it resolved, it fitting and appropriate that I, Matt Miller, Mayor, City of Anacortes, do hereby offer sincere thanks and appreciation to all our city's law enforcement officers who protect and serve our community. I publicly salute the service of all law enforcement officers in our county, state, and nation. And thanks for those who have joined us from our wonderful Anacortes Police Department. So, all right, on to other announcements and committee reports. Finance Committee is up first. Mr. Young.
It's one of my rare times I get to give the Financial Committee report. Myself and of course, Mr. Hoagland. We and Mr. Lunsford also attended the meeting. It was the three of us. And we discussed, it was a brief meeting and we discussed the skate park and also future requests that may come forward. To the ask will be for about $100,000, even though to mention it's a match in some ways. We already have about a $500,000 gift toward the skate park, which is a huge gift. But also the Kiwanians have raised about $100,000, and the skate park improvement project has also raised about $50,000. And so part of the hope is that when they bring it to the city, that we would look at it very favorably, given the amount of community participation, but also at the same time, the good that it would do for our community. So just that was part of the discussion. And also there was open government budget planning software. And that was another update about that. And we discussed budgeting that it will do and allow you as the public, as well as the team at the city, to be able to extrapolate different amounts of data and be able to provide reports and budgeting as would be necessary. Let's see. The annual report due to state auditors by May 27th, and we're already ahead of the game. Of course, the finance department did a great job. They're ahead of those reports. So favorable. Mr. Hoagland, did I miss anything or anything you want to add that might deem important for the public?
No, I think that was a good summary. Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you. I tell you, for my first one, it wasn't so bad. Just kidding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Up next, Housing Affordability Community Services Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Oh, Ms. Moulton.
Hi, thank you. The HACS committee meeting was actually canceled for last week, so we have no report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Public Works Committee is next.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Mr. Young, Ms. Moulton and I met with Public Works staff just before this meeting. We talked about a couple of things. First of all, I think it's next week that we're going to see a first read of the 2019 Stormwater Management Manual Code update. We are required to have rules for stormwater management. We adopt these every few years in response to updates from the Department of Ecology. The Department of Ecology has produced a new stormwater management manual. Our current code references the old manual, and the code update will largely update our code to reference the current manual. It's fairly straightforward, it's fairly brief, but it is required. We're expected to do a couple of reads on that. We received a couple of reports on some water pressure, overpressure events. May 5th, there was a substantial one sort of in the Skyline area. And then there was a water main break May 6th. We usually have about 2 of these water main breaks per year. So we're at our quota, no more, everybody. Public Works staff is looking at ways to mitigate this issue, but some of it is simply that we have aging water lines. We have a robust program to replace those water lines, but we're not doing them all at once. Spending, I think, something on the order of $1.5 million a year replacing those water lines. And so we're trying to stay on top of that. And then I think our final item in our Public Works Committee was an update on our cross connection control program. These are potential, these are opportunities for contaminants to enter the water system. So for example, anytime you've got a continuous connection to the water system, you could have backflow into the water system. A common incident of that is a landscape irrigation system. So you are required to have a backflow preventer on the water system to prevent backflow into the main water system from whatever it is you're doing on your own property. Public Works is looking at requiring electronic reporting starting in 2023 of the required annual tests of those backflow prevention systems. Because we require annual testing, we achieve about 75, 85%, but the goal is 100%. And right now we spend a lot of time with manual data entry. So Public Works is looking at new software to better manage the retail water system, index all the connections and make sure that we are on top of where all those are, where the cross connections are, and making sure that we're doing the required inspections. More next time.
All right, thank you. Any other announcements and committee reports? Okay, we're on to item number 4, which is public comment. And I got a couple of folks signed up. This is the opportunity to address the council on anything that is not on the agenda. I've got Laura, I apologize if I mispronounced the last name, Laura Spear and Andrea Dole. And for Andrea Dole, it says SMP. Are you talking about Shoreline Master Program later on? We can, okay. Yeah, well, I'll let you, if you want to wait till we talk about it, that'll be an opportunity. Okay, so Laura, if you're ready, come on up. And the subject I have is Pride Proclamation. And make sure you turn the microphone on, that the light turns blue. And then speak pretty close to the microphone so everybody can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah, gotcha. Perfect.
thank you so much. Laura Spihar, Anacortes resident and homeowner. Auburn, Bainbridge, Bellevue, Bonnie Lake, Bothell, Burien, Camas, Duval, Ellensburg, Federal Way, Issaquah, Kenmore, Kirkland, Lake Stevens, Mercer Island, Monroe, Mukilteo, Newcastle, Olympia, Port Townsend, Renton, Ridgefield, Redmond, Sammamish, SeaTac, Seattle, Shoreline, Spokane, Tacoma, Tomwater, Walla Walla, Wenatchee, Woodinville, Vancouver, Yakima, and now Mount Vernon. This is the list of communities with leadership that recognizes that human rights are not a controversial or political issue. These communities display great leadership when they include and acknowledge all of their citizens, be it city employees, past and present prominent leaders, students, business owners, our workers, community leaders, and of course, the tourists that come to our town and visit, and all these towns to visit. The Pride Month proclamation is a great opportunity for our mayor and city council. You know I respect all of you. And that's why I bring you things, because I appreciate you and your time. But I think this is a great time for you to show leadership for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, anybody else wish to address the council? Okay, we are on. Oh, please. Okay, come on up. And also, if you could respect if you're going to say the same thing, then you can, if it's okay, but you
Sure,
can,
yeah, I'll be quick, I
okay,
promise.
thank you.
My name is Natalie Clark. I've introduced myself individually to all of you via email. I'm here to follow up on my request for the city to issue a Pride proclamation. I want to thank the mayor for his timely response. I understand that that's not inside his plan, but I would like to ask the council if there's another way that our city can acknowledge our LGBTQ citizens, tourists, potential residents. I'm a resident, I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, and we are really looking forward to the Pride celebration this year. And it would be wonderful if our city could do something along with that to acknowledge that celebration, to acknowledge our LGBTQ citizens, some kind of official capacity where you can do that. We're happy to have our Pride Parade approved and to throw what we think is going to be a really successful event for the city. I'm going to be participating in the parade. I'd love to invite all of you guys to come to the parade or participate in it if you'd like. It is an event for all. And I want to thank you guys for your time and your leadership and for what you do for this community. I'm appreciative of it, and I know many of us are. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anybody? Okay, please come on up. Oops. Okay, well.
Sorry, she didn't know I was sitting behind her. I'm Shelley Brentzick-Higman. I'm a local family practice physician. We live here in town. Part of the reason we live here is because this is a warm and welcoming community. We chose it on purpose. Drew a 30-minute radius from my job on the map and chose Anacortes. So thanks to all of you for what you do to make this a wonderful place to live. I am originally from Spokane, Washington. I was at their first Pride Parade. To know that they now have a Pride Month is absolutely mind-blowing. It involves a huge road of progress. Even so, I would not choose to live in Spokane. I think that this is a community that can do this and hold this community, and that's why I'm here. And I would love to see that this proclamation reflects that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Come on up. Sure.
Aloha Council, my name is Rochelle Kealoha. Did you know that suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst American youth, with LGBTQ+ youth being 4 times more likely to consider, plan, and attempt suicide? In 2021 alone, 503,073 LGBTQ+ youth between the ages of 13 and 18 and 209,917 LGBTQ+ youth between the ages of 18 and 24 attempted suicide. 1.8 million LGBTQ+ youth seriously consider suicide in the US each year, and there is 1 suicide attempt of LGBTQ+ youth every 45 seconds in this country. 1/3 of all young gay people have attempted suicide, and according to the FBI, 1 in 5 hate crimes committed in America are committed against members of the LGBTQ+ community for having the audacity to exist. Until LGBTQ+ youth and adults stop considering, attempting, and committing suicide because they don't feel accepted by our society, It is imperative our local communities do everything to celebrate, highlight, and love with acceptance and pride. Pride days, months, weeks, parties, barbecues, while shouting our love from the rooftops. We need every human to understand we are all valued members and everyone is worthy and belongs. We have to go out of our way to show, accept, create, normalize allyship, and build a stronger, healthier, happier, and more resilient and inclusive community. In a 2022 poll, 7.1% of the American population, or 23,767,000 people, identify as LGBTQ+. And that number will continue to rise as we feel more comfortable and welcomed by our families, friends, neighborhoods, and communities. We are community members who own homes, boats, and even yachts. We pay rent, pay taxes, stimulate economy and tourism. We support local businesses, and some of us even own them. We are service industry workers, truck drivers, military, police, construction workers, healthcare professionals, volunteers, parents, siblings, children, and friends. We are pastors and educators. We are Anacortes. Supporting Pride is supporting human rights and love. Anacortes Pride is a nonpartisan organization. We have Republicans, Democrats, socialists, libertarians, and apolitical members. Not every LGBTQ+ member of our community or the entire US belongs to Anacortes Pride. So don't punish a community as a whole because you don't like the private politics of some members. I didn't realize being a member or ally of a marginalized community would ever be perceived as political. For reference, Mayor Miller, based upon information found on the APD website, we have about 18,000 residents in Anacortes, and statistically speaking, there are roughly 1,300 LGBTQ+ members in this community alone, as opposed to the 27 commissioned Anacortes police officers, whose guilds and unions are highly political and endorse candidates. Unlike Anacortes Pride or the Pride movement as a whole, I am not taking anything away from the profession of policing, but if you so quickly signed a proclamation celebrating Police Week, why can't you sign a proclamation celebrating Pride, whether it be for one day, week, or month? We all know you are a supporter of the Thin Blue Line, but are you a supporter and ally of the LGBTQ+ community? And if so, please stand up and show it by making a proclamation in support of Pride. And council, I urge you to use the governance, rule of law, or whatever tools you have available to stand up and show support for all citizens of Anacortes if the mayor refuses to be an inclusive representative of our entire community. Mahalo.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Anybody else before I close? Yes, please.
LaFleur.
There we go.
I'd like to say to you, Rochelle, she just sent me an email over the weekend telling me to suck a juicy dick and how I am the most garbage human on the planet.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but this person harassed all of us when we ran for public office.
I understand, but
Yeah.
I can't have members of the audience or anybody disparaging any other members
Well,
just for the decorum.
okay,
of
this
the
is what I
council.
received from this woman. And she's asking for a proclamation for people to be community. That's not what she's done to me. She's not done it to a lot of us. And if we allow our citizens in this community to treat each other this way, it's wrong. And I think we all agree, if I sent all of you what she sent me, and if you guys condone that, it's wrong. And it's ridiculous that we're even here and I'm even having to say this.
Okay.
But it's
okay.
just,
There can be no
It's my
outburst,
turn.
please.
so.
Everybody respects the opportunity to speak to council.
Yes, and the bottom line is, You guys have to look at what you're attaching yourself to. And when you lay down with dogs, you get fleas. And the problem is we should all be inclusive of one another and not be attacking each other behind the scenes. And none of us should accept that in any manner. And that's all I have to say. But this is not okay.
Thank you.
That's it.
Okay. 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 If there could be no more interruptions, I would appreciate that. It's an opportunity to speak to the council.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good afternoon. Good evening. Andrea Dahl, 1319 8th Street. I came here tonight to speak on something else, but I did want to get up now. As you know, I spent many, many years in Alaska and in Juneau. And I have to say that this is a human rights issue. And I came to see that it doesn't go anywhere unless there are a lot of people behind it. And it's so important that the public as a whole gets behind this movement to recognize those human rights. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
Yes, I thought normally doing these public comment, it's rare that council gets a chance or would choose to make any comment. But I thought in this case, it's unusual that not only do you have a LGBTQ plus member on city council, just for the record, I have been married with my spouse 30 years. He is a general surgeon, served this community extraordinarily well, served in the military. I have been in the public sector for many, 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 many years. And I come from organizers and have across the board supported extraordinary people of diverse hues, thoughts, ideas. I will say to you that we have a lovely town and I'm thankful for it. I'm glad that we now have a pride organization that's pushing forward its thoughts and ideas. And I just want to say, I just applaud our community for having an open heart to all of us, regardless of hue. And so I just thank you for coming forward. Thank you.
All right. So I think that's all I have signed up for public comment. And I will move on to item 5, our consent agenda. Council.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Carter.
I move we approve consent agenda alpha through Charlie.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Young.
I second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Carter, a second by Mr. Young to approve consent agenda items A, B, and C. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries. On to other business, which is our Shoreline Master Program periodic update. And Ms. Grange is going to introduce this one. And I think we have some help online that is going to do part of that presentation. Ms. Grange.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to get my PowerPoint presentation up here, so it'll be just a minute.
Am I missing something? Oh, our monitors are off. All right. Sorry, I'm looking at, we're on our C shift, but Steve's doing a great job. All right. We lost our monitors on the dais. That's what's going on up here. And we're doing the step 1 ON OFF switch. Well done. Thank you. We got him back.
Great, thank
Are
you. So yes, hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Libby Grage. I'm planning manager in the Planning, Community and Economic Development Department for the city of Anacortes. And this evening I am here to talk about the Shoreline Master Program periodic update. And we have an agenda here that I'll just go over quickly. First, we'll provide a little bit of background about the Shoreline Management Act, the Shoreline Master Program, and what's included in the periodic update process to introduce council to this issue. And the city of Anacortes contracted with the watershed company, and I will be handing it over a little bit later in the presentation to Alex Capron, who works for the watershed company and has been assisting on the periodic update process. So he's going to give a little overview of the process to date and also talk about some of the key amendments that are proposed as part of the update process. And then we'd like to turn it over for council discussion and feedback. Any questions that you have about the items that are covered or the materials in your packet. I know there was a lot. And also we are seeking feedback from the council about any additional changes that you would like to see as part of a public process moving forward, so we can get that started. And also anything that tonight's going to be just kind of an introduction. Don't plan on diving too deep into any one particular thing. So anything that you would like to have more conversation on at a subsequent meeting would be good to know, so we can prepare that. So what is the Shoreline Management Act? It is a state law that was ratified by the voters in 1972. It's been around for a while. It is in the Revised Code of Washington, Chapter 1958, and it provides a framework for managing, accessing, and protecting the state of Washington's shorelines. The law requires cities and counties to develop shoreline master programs in order to implement the Act's policies. So the overarching goal of the Shoreline Management Act is to prevent harm in an uncoordinated and piecemeal development of the state's shorelines. And there are three basic policy areas of the Shoreline Management Act, and those are up on your screen: to protect the environmental resources of state shorelines, promote public access and enjoyment opportunities, and to give priority to uses that actually require a shoreline location. And all Shoreline Master Program comprehensive updates and amendments must be consistent with those three basic policies. So the Shoreline Management Act, where does it apply? What lands does it affect in the city of Anacortes? And I think, do I need to make that smaller or move that somewhere else so you can see? I don't know.
I think. Yeah, there it is.
Okay. So this is a graphic showing approximate shoreline jurisdiction. And shoreline jurisdiction includes shorelines of the state, which are rivers and streams with a mean annual flow of more than 20 cubic feet per second, lakes that are 20 acres or larger in size, and all marine shorelines and shorelands extending 200 feet landward of the ordinary high water mark. So from the ordinary high water mark, 200 feet back onto the land is all within shoreline jurisdiction, as well as the water. And that's my point there. And also shorelines of statewide significance are also covered by the Shoreline Management Act, and the Puget Sound, the entirety of Puget Sound lying waterward of the extreme low tide is classified as a shoreline of statewide significance. Within Anacortes, the shoreline, this is our shoreline environment designation map. So this is showing the areas that are covered by the Shoreline Master Program. So you can see all the way along the coast or the shoreline here. So Shoreline Jurisdiction includes all marine shorelines, including Burroughs Bay, Flounder Bay here in Skyline, Guaymas Channel, and Fidalgo Bay, and a little teeny bit of Padilla Bay over here on the east of March's Point. We also have lakes in Anacortes, and several of those are also covered under the Shoreline Management Act, are in shoreline jurisdiction, and that includes the Little Cranberry, Hart, and Whistle Lakes, and a portion of Lake Erie down here in the southwest corner of the city. So what is a Shoreline Master Program? So the SMP is right now it's a standalone document that we have. It's local land use policies and regulations that guide use of shorelines. The SMP is based on state law and the Shoreline Management Act, but it's tailored to local conditions and development. There are three main parts of a Shoreline Master Program, including the policies, the shoreline regulations, and then administrative processes. And the Shoreline Master Program must be periodically reviewed and revised if needed. That's what we're doing here today. And the Department of Ecology has the ultimate approval authority for any of the amendments that are adopted by the city. So how do shoreline regulations apply to land and development? So any land use or development activity that occurs within shoreline jurisdiction is subject to the shoreline rules and regulations, including new or expanded structures, land development and alterations like clearing, grading, dredging, and filling, and other activities, including shoreline restoration, like plantings and bank stabilization, trail construction, and public access improvements. So almost every activity you can think of is covered by the Shoreline Master Program. So the periodic update of the SMP is focusing on relevant changes to legislation that has occurred since the 2010 Shoreline Master Program update, which was the last time the city updated the SMP. It was a comprehensive Shoreline Master Program update, so it really went in depth. And so what we're doing is trying to look at what updates have been made to the Shoreline Management Act and other state laws and guidance that we need to look to update in our SMP to make sure that it's consistent. Also, in the periodic update, we're looking at consistency of the policies and regulations with the 2016 comprehensive plan update, and also with other city regulations. So the city's development regulations and critical areas regulations, making sure that any changes that have been made to those since the last time the SMP was updated, that we're capturing all of those and everything is consistent. The periodic update does not reevaluate the ecological baseline that was established as part of the 2010 SMP update. And it also doesn't extensively assess the no net loss criteria, other than to ensure that any of the proposed amendments will not result in degradation of the baseline condition. So we're mostly looking at, through this periodic update, making sure that the plan is consistent with any changes that have occurred to other laws and documents, planning documents since the last time it was updated. Also included in this update process is codification of the shoreline regulations into Title 19 of the Anacortes Municipal Code Development Regulations. migration of the shoreline goals and policies over to the comprehensive plan in a new shoreline element of the comprehensive plan. And also incorporation by reference of the applicable parts of our recently updated critical areas regulations. Okay, that wraps it up for me. And I'd like to introduce Alex Capron, who is with the Watershed Company, and he's going to talk a little bit about the process that we've gone through to date to get to this point, and also provide an overview of some of the key proposed amendments that are part of this process.
Welcome, Alex.
All right, thank you, Mayor Marilla. Thank you, Libby. Let me share my screen here. All right. Well, yeah, I'll move through here and discuss the amendments as part of the master program, Shoreline Master Program for City of Anacortes. So just giving a little background, just kind of the overall history of this project. So it did start back in 2019. It was actually an in-person open house on October 30th, followed by a virtual one in March 2020. Later on in 2020, there were two Planning Commission study sessions that discussed the comprehensive updates or the updates as part of the periodic update. And with that, a joint ecology and city public hearing and public comment period. And so this was unique actually to the periodic update process in general, where ecology actually did their initial determination. So their initial review of the updates, the amendments, based on input from the public. So they completed their comment period and public hearing jointly with the city in order to do that. And with that, they were able to provide initial feedback and get any concerns out of the way there in the beginning of this update. So as part of the public comment period, we received 47 public comments, some of which resulted in changes to the SMP. And then, the submittal for the initial determination happened in the spring. I think the original version of the PowerPoint presentation here in the packet had mentioned January, but it was actually later on in the spring. And then, received the initial determination from ecology in October. So that included a series of recommended and required changes. And after those changes occurred, there was a second draft public comment period that took place between February and March. And with that, a public comment response matrix was provided to Planning Commission, and they provided that recommendation to City Council. So, some of the focused amendments as part of this periodic update, just looking at a high level here. So looking at critical areas provisions and where they apply within shoreline jurisdiction. Also, pier maintenance for single family piers, some provisions there that were related within the second draft of the SMP. And then shoreline environment designation changes. There's a couple more significant ones. And then related to one of those changes, the some accessory use provisions within shoreline jurisdiction. Also looking at aquaculture and some possible changes there, and vegetation conservation standards related to tree trimming. And then, Libby touched on the codification process there, as well as, the public comment responses and some suggested changes to the SMP. So looking at critical areas, so the way the SMP is set up currently, critical areas are a standalone appendix that are a dated version of the critical areas ordinance. And so those are going away, and the SMP is referencing the current ordinance. But with that, there are a few exclusions that are listed out here. And these are provisions that don't explicitly meet a no net loss of shoreline ecological function. So critical areas review, that's that first item on the list. That includes provisions for non-conforming structures. So these are already addressed in the SMP in the non-conforming chapter. Reasonable use is another one where that actually would just go through a shoreline variance approval process, and Department of Ecology would be the final decision-making authority as part of that process. So while these are items that are excluded from the SMP has a specific set of activities that are allowed within the SMP that are subject to the critical areas criteria. And one of them that I'm touching on here is adding back in mitigation sequencing to the wetland standards of the SMP. So if a proposal is a water-oriented use, so that's a development proposal that, if it's impacting a wetland or its buffer, that it would have to go through mitigation sequencing in order to get approval. And so mitigation sequencing is you're demonstrating that you're avoiding the impact in all possible ways, and then minimizing, rectifying, or reducing the impact. So that covers one of the add-ins to the wetland specific regulations of the SMP.
Mayor Miller.
So, Mr. Walters.
Could you identify the precise code citation where those changes are occurring? Because you've got the development regulation number, and we're now working off of the 1972 numbering scheme.
Right. Yes. I would be able to do that. I'd have to hop out of the presentation. So if I am able to get back to that, because
maybe not right now. Then we can follow up on that later. It's just obviously we've got some things going on here with critical areas, with our critical areas code outside of the shoreline plan, and I want to fully understand exactly what it is we're doing. So maybe we can circle back.
Okay, great. Pier maintenance was an item that came up, kind of midstream in the SMP update process. So kind of giving a context to the situation. So single family piers within city limits are really only found within Flounder Bay, so right by Washington Park. And a lot of these single family piers are non-conforming in nature. So they exceed the size requirements as demonstrated by the SMP. So with that, city recognizes that the WAC, so that's Washington Advisory Code 173-27040, there are replacement provisions where replacement may be authorized as repair. So this can be demonstrated as a common method so long as the footprint and configuration aren't changing. So with that, there's actually some benefit on an ecological front shown here on this slide. So this diagram here just kind of shows the nature of a lot of these piers. They're floats. And so if an applicant were to come in to do pier maintenance, they would have to update to the standards at play, where if they have solid decking, they would have to convert that to graded decking. If they had any creosote piles, those would have to be removed and replaced with steel piles. And that the gangway within the first 30 feet, so that's the near shore area of the shoreline, which is the most ecologically significant portion of the shoreline, that could be only 4 feet in width. So these measures are able to help lessen the impact and promote, some bit of ecological restoration along the site compared with existing conditions. So these are items that will help promote maintenance and improvement of piers, through an ecological lens. So looking at shoreline environment designations, there's 2 here that I'll talk about. The first one has to do, in the Ship Harbor, where it's changing the urban shoreline environment designation to a split designation of conservancy and shoreline residential. And so this is following the underlying zoning of single family residential underneath these SEDs, and is really just matching the existing zoning. The second one, it's in a way a similar change, but it's a very different circumstance. So you have a very narrow band of land that's adjacent to 2 existing overwater structures, so the 2 canneries there, and changing that shoreline environment designation from urban to shoreline residential. And this recognizes, some of the landward constraints of the site. This is a photo of the Sebastian Stewart Cannery, and you can see the very steep topography that abuts that existing structure, and then the narrow lot that is also part of that. So any standalone use that would be independent of this structure wouldn't really be viable. So with that, the shoreline environment designation change reflects that. So any more intense use that's independent would be very difficult to support. That having been said, there's definite support for reuse of these overwater structures and accessory uses that can support the overwater use. So with that, this development regulation supports that, so long as it is subordinate and incidental, and that it would eliminate any constraints to support accessory parking that would help the adaptive reuse of these overwater structures.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
But in this area, in the area landward of the channel, you're also going to need to be consistent with zoning. So zoning, I guess I'm not 100% sure of the zoning in this part of town, but would zoning be consistent with some of these accessory uses you've highlighted here?
Yes, I believe so. I believe, and Libby, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it is single family landward of the ordinary high water mark where this shoreline environment designation is occurring.
Miller.
Yeah,
Thank
please.
you. Yeah, that's correct. So the future land use designation and zoning all the way down to the ordinary high water mark is residential R2, R2A, the Old Town, I believe, different residential designations. And so within those designations, accessory uses are allowed, including parking, accessory parking, which is what really I could foresee as that area being used really as redevelopment or reuse of those structures occurs. So we're really expecting very minimal use of that area. And we have looked at the zoning and felt that this change would be compatible with the zoning.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
You had a similar question as for the potential use of those overwater structures. There was some kind of conversation from the public comments earlier, and one of the questions I think from Mr. Glade asked about could one of those overwater structures be converted, or could a hotel, a restaurant, something like that be constructed there? And the response pointed to a response about residential being constructed over water. So I wasn't quite clear, like, could a water-oriented, like a seafood restaurant, be located on one of those?
So I'm going to want to take a look at the specific criteria. I know that a water, and Alex, you might have to help me out here. A water enjoyment use, redevelopment of a water enjoyment use, which I believe a restaurant would fall into, would require compliance with a very specific set of criteria, including, I believe that the structure would need to be recognized as historically significant by the Anacortes Historic Preservation Board. So it would need to go through a few steps. It would need to incorporate public access into the development, and there are certain percentages, and I'm happy to bring back the specifics on that as far as whether that could occur and under what conditions.
Okay, what about a hotel? Same thing, bring back specifics, or?
Well, we can take a look. I don't believe so.
Yeah, I believe it'd have to be water oriented. And yeah, I think, yeah, water enjoyment, that may be, something that could be looked at, but yeah, a hotel would have a much higher bar to be able to demonstrate that.
I'm happy to look at this and bring more information with specifics at the next meeting.
Yeah,
Sounds
I'm
great. Thank you.
always reluctant to quote zoning regulations off the top of my head as well, and that's a good idea. We'll bring that back, make sure we can answer that question.
Great. Yeah, so moving on. So, in touching on, overwater structures and, addressing the economic viability of adaptive reuse of these overwater structures. Currently, the SMP prohibits all aquaculture, except that for native stock and support of native aquaculture, population support. So the proposal is to have overwater aquaculture, so not in water, but over water, that's currently prohibited, a shoreline conditional use permit. And then really going through some of these amendments here, having really strict parameters for when this would apply. Just kind of to summarize some of the items that an applicant would have to go through, they'd have to demonstrate the noise generation as well as vehicular traffic impacts, and then also demonstrating that the chemicals and other types of materials used meet Department of Fish and Wildlife and Department of Health, amongst other regulatory bodies, that meets their requirements as well. There's no...
Mr. Walters.
I can't quite read the first paragraph there because of the
sorry, yes,
Zoom label, but is the biggest constraint here is that only non-commercial aquaculture for recovery of a native population is allowed?
Well, no, it would be commercial aquaculture, but it would be essentially above water, and it would be contained
so
within a structure.
All right. I guess I would advocate breaking that paragraph up to make it clear that those are two parallel but different provisions. In water aquaculture would be prohibited except for non-commercial, but over water aquaculture would be permitted subject to the following provisions. or
Right,
or-
is,
or
and then
both
are you
types.
speaking to the
Or-
previous slide? Where I think I see what you're saying here. So you want those broken up. That's what I'm hearing.
just to make it very, very clear that those are parallel but different.
Right. Right. Okay. Understood. Perfect. Great.
Are we proposing any changes in the process for shoreline conditional use permits?
No, and those are adopted at the state level. So a shoreline conditional use permit would be approved by Department of Ecology. Yeah, and that's the parameters for meeting a shoreline conditional use permit. In addition to these regulations are set at the Washington Advisory Code. So while the Anacortes Municipal Code will have them, they match at the state level.
Well, the Department of Ecology will have to give the final approval, but they go through a local process.
Right.
Correct.
Got this one, Alex.
Yeah.
Our local process, there are not any changes proposed at this time, but the Planning Commission is the decision maker for shoreline conditional use permits.
And are we required under state law to allow for aquaculture? Is that why we're making this change?
Alex?
No, we are not required to make the change. I think this is more following suit with the overall principles of the SMP to encourage water-oriented uses for those that have a fixed location at the shoreline.
And okay, so one more. An overwater aquaculture project using a legal above water structure. What does that look like? What is an example of that?
Well, I think, yeah, so essentially the two canneries that are existing over water structures are two candidates, for example. But it can be water oriented. So while an overwater structure is a good candidate, also other uses that are within shoreline jurisdiction that are utilizing the water could also be a candidate.
I'm still having trouble. And in water aquaculture is what I think of as a layperson, just thinking of aquaculture. So over water aquaculture, are we using big tubs in an overwater structure? What is the aquaculture part? The cannery itself isn't aquaculture, right?
Well, yeah, right. So an overwater, so it'd be something that would be contained completely within a structure. So I am also not an expert on aquaculture types, but it's my understanding that you would have a set of aquarium style setup equipment, to essentially grow invertebrate aquaculture species for sale.
Okay. All right, I've seen stuff like that, including for salmon. I guess so long as it's not in the water, I don't really have a problem with that.
Right, and that actually does lead me to the other, the next slide. So there was actually some language within the SMP that had reference to fishnet pens, and that is something that's outright removed from the SMP. And then, yeah, for any items that are any portion of the aquaculture that is outside of the legal existing structure, if it's a container, what have you, that it can't exceed 3 feet in height, and that any aquaculture infrastructure that would exceed that height would have to provide a visual impact analysis from upland properties to demonstrate compliance. And then as well as utilizing ensuring that equipment that's used in the operation is in good working order. So that is, getting in front of any nuisances that could be involved in operation. Okay, and then, one of the key amendments to the vegetation conservation standards has to do with tree trimming. So this is something along the shoreline where the standards of tree trimming need to be improved, essentially to help preserve the ecology along the shoreline. So instead of seeing instances where trees are trimmed up all the way up to near the top, that 75% of the crown needs to be retained. And that, currently there isn't any kind of permit required, but that now a clearing and grading permit would be required for a tree trimming activity in the shoreline environment.
Mayor Miller?
Yes, Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Capron. I just have a question of applicability here that I bet Libby can answer. So I know we've had some clearing going on in the past above the Guaymas Channel Trail, and there have been questions about erosion and things like that. So if property owners wish to trim their trees in future, once we adopt this, what will be the results in that situation? Will they have to get a permit?
Yes.
Okay. And they will know this in advance. I guess I'm thinking ahead to enforcement. There was also that incident quite a few years back by the Ship Harbor Inn where that whole area was, I believe, clear. And I don't know who owns the property. I don't know who owned the property. So, but that area was basically clear cut. And I think that was without permission. So I'm just kind of thinking ahead to permits and enforcement and things like that, because I think this is really important. And I want to make sure that we do it right and that it's effective.
Thank you, Ms. Moulton. And we do have plans once the SMP is adopted, if these amendments are adopted and approved, to do some more public outreach to shoreline property owners, including sending out a mailer with this exact information, letting them know what the changed rules are.
Thank you, Ms. Grage. That's excellent. And then I also wonder if in certain instances where we have some history, if it might not be worth phone calls, and if there are homeowners associations, or maybe even like in person at the door, because I think I think that the more communication, the better. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall and I think Mr. Walters.
Ms. Grage, actually really quick follow-up to Ms. Moulton's comments. Would we also be sending out mailers to local arborists and things like that, making sure that they know about the requirement?
Yes, we have thought about that. We've had requests from local arborists for more straightforward and specific guidance in those cases.
Okay, thank
you. Mr. Walters.
This provision, DR 6.5.9, I find in the code that's provided on page 58 to still read under authorization of a shoreline exemption and not mention the clearing and grading permit. It's not obvious to me that the clearing and grading permit itself, adding that language solves our problem here, but it's also a circular reference because clearing and grading permits have to be compliant with the Shoreline Master Program. What do we intend to do here? Do we intend to require a clearing and grading permit? Is that what staff?
It is, yes.
Okay. So if that's true, I would recommend, first of all, that we make sure that that's in the draft, because it's not in the draft that I'm looking at from the packet on page 58, but also that we mention AMC 1978, that it's not a clearing and grading permit just issued under the building code or something like that, that it references AMC chapter 1978. And then do you feel like there's no need for a letter of exemption under the shoreline program?
You know, we explored, that was what we had explored initially. And the guidance from the Department of Ecology is that trimming of vegetation does not meet the definition of development. And so therefore you really can't issue a letter of exemption to a shoreline substantial development permit if the activity is not defined as development. So this was kind of a way to identify a permit review process for those projects.
That makes sense to me, especially if, I mean, it's premised on us having sufficient information in the code, standards in the code. This graphic isn't in the code, but could it be? I mean, would that help?
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of graphics in our new development code, and this one seems to provide some instruction.
Yeah, I don't know why we couldn't do that. Yeah.
Great. So yeah, moving on to the next slide, still with this topic. So this kind of speaks to some of the permit requirements that would be related to this type of activity. That if any trimming were to occur in critical areas, they would actually need a qualified professional to demonstrate that there's no impact to fish and wildlife habitat, to wetlands or their buffer. And it doesn't impact soil stability. And that in order to ensure permit compliance, that there be a photo demonstration pre and post activity to demonstrate compliance with this regulation. And that this could be utilized for view preservation, but not view creation. So there'd be some demonstration there. From the applicant that this is from the date of SMP adoption. And that is the original, the comprehensive update. That was in 2010. And then here, Libby already touched on this. And you're right, there's essentially the codified version of the SMP and then the SMP that I've been using as part of my screenshots. So that'll all go over into, Anacortes Municipal Code, Chapter 19.72, and also migrating, Chapter 18.16. So the shoreline permit procedures, so that's the shoreline substantial development permit, shoreline letter of exemption, migrating those in as well, and moving all the goals and policies of the SMP into the shoreline element, and that the standalone SMP would eventually go away, and that codified version would remain as part of the adoption ordinance. So looking at the public comment response matrix that was provided to Planning Commission. So this is as part of the public comment period from mid-February to mid-March. There's the review of a couple different topic areas that may result in change here. One had to do with treated wood and recognizing that the possible advancements of ecologically sound treated wood options. Though this wouldn't be allowed without mutual consent of state and federal agencies. And so as a result, the suggested edit here is that the minimization language for treated wood could be removed as part of this comment. There's also, sea level rise additions added or suggested as part of the update. And these comments were made by Skagit Land Trust, recognizing that this is still kind of an emerging topic, and that a good first step is adding a series of policies that recognize this issue. So first, adding a sea level rise projection that meets best available science, and then revisiting this projection periodically. So yeah, every 8 years. And then monitoring the effects of climate change as new science and literature come out on this issue. And recognizing that the city should develop plans that address sea level rise and their impacts to the community.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. One thing that we mentioned in the planning committee meeting most recently is maybe we could do that every 4 years, revisit sea level rise. Things are changing pretty quickly. So I would just suggest something a little bit more often, if we could. I don't know how the rest of council feels about that, but that's my thought. 4 years sounds better than 8 to me, but.
Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I actually was going to suggest removal of the number so that it simply read that we would revisit them with each periodic update, which wouldn't be every 4 years. But it would seem to me to be more consistent with what we would do to address sea level rise projections.
Yeah, that's what the 8 years was intended to be.
Yeah.
Periodic update every
Yeah, I
8 years.
assume that was timed with the update of the shoreline, the SMP update requirement.
Yeah. Yeah, I recommend removing the
But
number because the
taking-
legislature changes that number occasionally.
And then, continuing on with sea level rise. So this is in regards to an existing regulation that prohibits hard armoring of shorelines that would result in new development or creation of new parcels. So that incorporating sea level rise in that analysis from the applicant, that's just another requirement they would need to demonstrate in any activity that would utilize the use of a new hard armoring. So that is another recommended edit that's a result of
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I think of our frequently flooded regulations as being the primary mechanism for addressing sea level rise, actually, rather than the Shoreline Master Program. I wonder if Ms. Grage could comment on that. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. And I believe that some proposed amendments to the frequently flooded or floodplain development regulations are coming to council here in the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
Great. Yes. All right. And so, this brings me to next steps. So, after I finish with this slide, I can pull up the wetland specific regulations of the SMP. After this, there's next week's meeting that will include further deliberation by City Council in addressing any recommended changes, some of which we've received tonight, that can be incorporated into the public comment period version of the SMP that leads to a June 30th City Council public hearing. And if all goes well, the anticipated SMP adoption in late June or early July. So with that, I can.
Mayor Miller.
Yeah, Ms. Grange.
I just noticed this myself. The public hearing date on June 20th would actually be the 21st because I believe the council meeting is on the Tuesday that week, just to clarify.
Thank you for that. And that kind of leads me to, I just wanted to make sure that we're clear about what the process is moving forward, because I think the idea of us tonight was to get council's input and then we make some changes and then invite public comment. I know at least one member of the audience signed up to comment tonight. I don't know if that was the intent or not going forward.
Yeah, this evening isn't advertised as a public hearing, but council's more than welcome to
Yeah.
listen to members of the audience.
Yeah, that I am certainly open to public comment, but the process was to have council provide the input, us come up with a new draft and have that draft available for public comment at multiple meetings. Is that?
That's correct. That's the idea.
All right. But I will take public, Ms. Dole, if you wanted to. Okay, all right. Well, I don't want you to miss the opportunity to, and an email works great too, to make sure you get the comments in.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I have a few comments at this point. Number one, I think we are making a big step forward by integrating the regulations into the municipal code. It improves accessibility for the public. It improves administration of the rules. If you can find the rules in all the same spot, should make it more easy for development. I would like to submit to the department some line by line edits that we needn't bore council with, but there are some numbering issues in a couple of sections. There's some sections that don't have line numbers. I think it looks like we've done a search and replace for shall to must, then maybe to will, and that needs a little bit more tweaking in a couple of places. It wouldn't change, I don't think, the intent, but it would make it more clear. In the substantial development thresholds, it looks like we're citing that directly from the statute, and it looks like it cites the original thresholds, like $2,500 for a dock, but those have been incremented over time, right? They've been indexed to inflation. So I really wonder what utility there is in including the original statutory adopted incorrect numbers in that section, because the reader will read along and might miss the thing about them being indexed to inflation.
Yeah, I thought that we had included the newest adopted numbers in there. So,
well, maybe we can have an offline conversation about that, because I think that would be more useful.
I agree.
And in tree preservation, I think it would benefit us to really dive in there. If there are more graphics even than what we've seen here to fully illustrate that, because that's been such a big issue for us. At one point, I thought we were going to pursue an entirely new tree preservation code that would go beyond the SMP. Maybe there aren't any more current plans for that, but maybe we can talk about that separately. But I wonder if we might look at some examples in our next meeting on this, because it will come up again. It has been a big issue in the past. It will be again. I think more clarity here would be useful.
More examples of what the regulations are trying to say,
and how they would be applied.
Yep.
I think. And then finally, we are talking under the shoreline rules, ecology gets veto and approval authority over our critical areas regulations that we incorporate by reference, whereas they really don't have that outside of the shoreline jurisdiction. And here we're incorporating some critical areas regulations by reference, but we're simultaneously talking about a different pathway. We're going to be changing the critical areas regs. Are we changing any of the regs that we are incorporating by reference? Are we creating a problem where we're going to have to come back and amend this again later? What is our thinking there?
I could speak to that real quick. We're actually adopting by ordinance. So it's a specific dated ordinance as opposed to by reference. But that is a really good point that, yeah, if we were to have adopted by reference, it would be, yeah, subject to ecology review. So
that introduces its own problem. And I've dealt with this before, so I understand that it's just a problem. But so will there be a citation to the code as of a certain date? And will the reader know for sure will the reader be able to follow that when they look at it on our code publishing website?
They should be able to follow it. Yes. As you mentioned, it is really a complicated issue, and there's several different ways to do it. We thought that incorporating by reference would put everything sort of in the same document. Right now, we have the appendix in the separate Shoreline Master Program, which people miss all the time as well. So we thought that this might be a little bit more clear.
Would we be able to link that reference in the new code to the version that was adopted on the given date on the code publishing website so that people could click and go to the right version?
I think so. We could work with code publishing to figure out how to do that, or link to the adopted ordinance itself with
The pages in the
attachment.
PDF. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Grange or
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Keprin? Ms. Moulton?
Thanks. I just want to say thank you to Ms. Grange, because this is your presentation is excellent and to the point, and I know it took a lot to get here. So thank you for all the work that you did, and you too, Mr. Capron, for getting us here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, did somebody want to comment on the shoreline? Was there shoreline management? Oh, okay, come on. We'll get it now, or we'll get it after we update it and republish it.
Good evening. My name's Marlene Finley. I'm with Evergreen Islands, and I live here in Anacortes. I appreciate the attention to sea level rise comments, and there's a discussion this evening and the ideas. And as you look at recommended changes, I urge you to look very closely at not only the sea level rise, but also the effects of extreme weather during climate change, the high wind and high tides that we're seeing during heavy precipitation. And there's some allowances in the draft for shoreline trails in the Conservancy SED. And, some of those shoreline trails could require hard armoring, and they also can get battered by extreme weather events. So just some caution there. And also, I'm not sure that it would, the sea level rise precautions could be fully covered under the floodplain development code. So just a little bit, it just seems like there's a little more work to do there. So thanks so much, and really good job, Libby.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Wetcher, come on up.
Brian Wetcher. I'm a resident of Anacortes and a member of Evergreen Islands Board. I'll speak first of all to something I have a little bit of expertise in. We have a lot of varied shoreline habitat within our jurisdiction. A lot of the shading or what you would call overshadowing functions differently in a lot of these different habitats. And the contrast would be, for instance, the Guimas Trail. There's different kinds of habitat there than there are, especially along the Tommy Thompson Trail on the inner area of the Fidalgo Bay. That's a primary forage fish spawning area in those gravel beds. I know that the condominiums have been in the past reticent to not remove that vegetation for their views in there. And that's just an example of the different kinds of functions, and that we may have to develop different standards for different kinds of shoreline habitat function for those to actually function in that area. So there's going to be a different kind of standard for those trees along there to shade those forage fish eggs when they're in there. And we all know that Department of Fish and Wildlife is very, very excited about forage fish because of salmon decline. Secondly, I'd like to ask, since we've had so many different changes so far since the SEPA determination of DNS, are we assured that the SEPA DNS for the Shoreline Master Plan is still entirely applicable, particularly considering that There is some critical areas ordinance language that is still to be determined. And that language is to be brought across, I believe, into the SMP in whole or in part where it's applicable, as ecology stated some places in the document that would not be applicable, and they required additional language in there. And the third question I have along that lines is that additional language or replacement language, which Department of Ecology basically said you have to write a different standard for the shoreline master plan about buffers, for instance, than taking the CAO language directly across. Is the CAO language ready to go into the shoreline master plan? And is the additional language ready to be put forward for those areas that the DOE said they required new language and not replacement or placement language from the critical areas ordinance? Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Grange, anything else? We got all those notes. I think Mr. Walters.
Just one thing with respect to sea level rise. I think it's obvious that we need to address sea level rise. We need to be aware of it as we're permitting development adjacent to our shorelines. But I ponder and don't know how to address it. So I think anybody that wants to submit with specificity comments about how they think that it should be addressed, definitely now would be the time. I mean, my sense of it is you just need to back away from the shoreline. That's the most important development regulation that we can adopt, and that is being addressed by the frequently flooded code section in the critical areas code. But if there's something else, don't hold back. Let us know what you think.
Okay, is that it?
That's all I've got. Thank you very much, everyone,
Okay.
for all of your feedback.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for wading through who didn't necessarily come here to hear the awesome Shoreline Master Program periodic update, but appreciate you all coming in, and we've heard you, and thanks again. So with that, I will adjourn the City Council meeting. Thanks.